Hi everyone, Andy Barrow, the CTO of A&S. So I've been asked to really put some thoughts together on the last 3 months with respect to digital transformation in organisations and what we've personally seen, what we think is going to stick, what we think is going to happen moving forward. And it's really an opinion piece for myself from just speaking to many customers over an incredibly short period of time and trying to offer some help in areas that we can with some of the services that we offer. I think the first thing is I think there's a general consensus in the industry that there's a significant amount of digital transformation, years worth of digital transformation happening in a very short space of time. I think that proves sort of one thing. We've probably taken collaboration tooling for granted. You know, everybody's got it, the common platforms, your Microsoft Teams, your Zooms, your WebExes, whatever they may be. The usage of those platforms has just skyrocketed, and I think that there's a significant amount of people who've never even turned the video on before now that think it's odd to not have the video on. So I think it's wonderful from a collaboration perspective and a freedom perspective of how most of the country and most of the organisations that certainly, most of the world in fact, most of the organisations we deal with have adapted to that. But in reality I think it's, we've taken collaboration tooling for granted and the powerful nature of collaboration tooling. I've seen a significant amount of people that have done maybe 2 and 3 year projects in maybe 2 and 3 weeks. So I think that what highlights is, in some ways, if I'm being quite frank, the unnecessary amount of regulation, governance and potentially bureaucracy that some of the enterprise organisations actually have when it comes to deploying large scale projects. And actually big, when you have large, big projects with big budgets, they're typically difficult to get through governance, they're difficult to fund, they have a high failure rate, and I think lots of organisations have started to attempt projects a little bit differently. How do we do, bite-sized pieces? How do we operate in a much more, dare I say, agile way as we deploy some of these new technologies to actually get some outcomes faster and not build everything up in sort of a waterfall style methodology? And we've seen that happen. We've seen organisations break big complex things down into bite-sized pieces and get much further faster. I think there's many verticals that are having to redefine the way that they offer things and are actually accelerating some of the plans that they were going to do anyway. More digital learning facilities in higher education, different ways of attracting students and engaging students. We're seeing retail massively move. Healthcare is another one where there's been thousands of percentage increases into how we engage with our doctors and nurses. I for one used the GP very rarely, but I had to use the GP in lockdown and I did it all from my phone, and actually it was an amazing experience. I had my prescription within an hour and a half. I didn't have to wait for an appointment. It was all done via an app, and I think that that's one way that we can actually take a massive amount of positives from this, as well as things like the environment and and cars off the road and some of the other green initiatives that I think most organisations would like to see stay and be sustained. I'm not sure, people now talk to what's the new normal. So if I look at forward, what does the next, that's how we've seen the last 3 months, what the next 12, 18 months, 2 months like, what's the new normal look like? Everything's changed, everything's on its head. And I think one thing I'd just say to sort of round off some of the comments is, in many areas, the COVID pandemic hasn't necessarily changed anything. It has for some, I agree, but it's not necessarily changed anything. What it's done is it's accelerated a lot of trends that were probably going to happen over a significant period of time anyway. So business models that were just outdated, that are really struggling now, that was happening anyway. It's just they've almost died a lot sooner than what they would have done because the market's just changed around them in such a short space of time. They haven't really been in a position to ride out, that kind of storm. And I think what that's done is really highlight those business models that really haven't got the longevity in them. Some of them might have survived for another 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe even a decade. But the reality is, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that's just accelerated some of that. So I think that's another one. I think what it's also done is its workplace becomes much more flexible moving forward. It's one of the most common topics that people talk about the last 3 months is what does the workplace actually look like now? And workplace was one of those areas that you came to work, and now a lot of organisations are going, well, we're coming to do a team building activity, or we're totally going to redefine the way that the workplace is actually used. And I think a lot of organisations have seen productivity's gone through the roof over the last 3 months. Whether that's sustainable in its form is probably still out to the jury, but the reality is people are questioning whether they need big expensive buildings in city centres, and at the same time, what does that do to skills? Because I know many organisations moving forward are really going to struggle to find the skills this next 2, 3, 4, 5 years for some of the initiatives that those organisations had, and recruitment was becoming incredibly difficult. So now I have a much more flexible, almost borderless workplace where you're actually free to recruit from a much wider circle of talent in a much wider area of the country and even globally, purely because you're not now binding yourself to being able to commute into a city.